Welcome everyone to another Lake Lewis Jr. show. I appreciate you joining me today. Got a lot of stuff that we're going to break down today. The Washington Commanders had a big win yesterday, and it was just so much stuff going on at that football game and in the stadium. The crowd was excited. And I think for the first time in a long time, especially against a divisional foe in the New York Giants, it wasn't a whole lot of Giants fans. It was a lot, but I think to the tune of maybe 65% of the crowd was Washington Commanders fans. So they gave them something good to go home to. And sure, they didn't score, but at the end of the day, a win is a win. And when you can get it against a divisional foe and a team that's beat you, in the last 10 times, 10 games, the Giants had a 7-2-1 mark against Washington. So that was a big win. So we'll talk about that today. And then, of course, we'll talk about some storylines that are going on in the NFL. Lots of surprising victories yesterday by some teams that no one thought had a chance, and they won big, not just one, but won big. So we'll discuss that. And then a little bit later on in today's show, I'm going to bring in two of my good family members from sportsjourney.com. Those guys are running it for me now, doing a wonderful job. So I have Bob Matthews coming over, and you can check out Bob Matthews on his Bob Matthews podcast. And then, of course, DJ Bland, who you can check out on the Not Bland podcast. These guys have been covering the NFL for years. DJ was at USA Today with me and About.com and Heavy.com over the years. So he does a great job covering the NFC South. So we'll have those two gentlemen on, and I'll get their recap of what they saw around the league yesterday and also with the Commanders. So yesterday, folks, it was, like I said, one of those busy days. Naturally, after the game, I do a post-game show with my good friend, Natalie Spalla, who's doing a wonderful job at ABC News in DC, WJLA Channel 7. And we did that. And then I was asked by Fox. That's right, folks. Fox News in DC, Channel 5, if you live in DC. They asked me to come on live after the game, right after the game. And I was on with them for about 13 minutes or so. So had a lot of friends reaching out to me today and saying, hey, I thought you were ABC. And I'm like, I am, but I still can do some other things, so thank God everyone was cool with that. So yeah, people saw me on two networks yesterday. So that's a sign of growth, I think, my friends. So anyway, we broke down a big win for the Washington Commanders. It was a win they had to have. I said yesterday's game between New York and Washington was a must-win week 2 game for both teams. And, so just to put things in perspective, if you look at what's going on in New York today in the tabloids and in the paper, they're calling for blood. They're calling for heads up there. They're calling for Brian Daboll. They're calling for Daniel Jones. There's some people are mad at Malik Neighbors because he dropped a critical 4th down play, but he looked like the best player for the Giants on the field yesterday. I mean, that's how dominant that rookie is, and he's got such a bright future in the NFL ahead of him. Once he gets some more talent around him on that offense, he clearly shows you that he's a true number 1 receiver, and I think the sky's the limit for him. But his good friend from college at LSU, on the other side of the ball for the Washington Commanders, Jaden Daniels, yet again showed every trick in the bag, showed early that he could run, showed that he could take some big hits because he got knocked out of the game for a play and came back, actually 2 plays and came back. And when he went down in that part of the field, some people in the press box with me were like, oh my God, here we go again. Everyone gets hurt on this side of the field. There's been some, catastrophic injuries to quarterbacks in the building. And you don't want to, always compare and make those, those synergies. But when it happened, it just eerily made you think, is this franchise snake bit? Are they getting ready to lose another high value draft pick at the quarterback position? Hence the way they lost RG3. Well, I think all of us have to remember this kid has nothing to do with Robert, and Robert had nothing to do with him. Do they play similar games in some facets? Sure. But you know what? Let's put some things in perspective here, my friends. That's the NFL of today. Hell, even Patrick Mahomes runs. So I think fans need to really, dial it down a little bit with these quarterbacks and stop telling them to stay in the pocket all the time. Because I do want to put this out there. Yes. Does he need to run as much? Does he need to take the hits that he's taking? Absolutely not. And I think after the hit he took yesterday to knock the wind out of him and made him miss a couple plays, You notice when he came back in, he was a lot more cautious, but not cautious to the point of scared, just smart. So almost that hit knocked some sense into him to make him realize these dudes up here at this level are coming with a little bit more, violent intention behind their hits. And they're a lot bigger and they're a lot faster. That's why they're professionals. So I think for Jaden Daniels, that light bulb went on after that hit. And he just started throwing the football more effectively. And more importantly, Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator for the Commanders, decided, you know what? I'm going to have my young guy turn around and hand the ball off. And Brian Robinson was the unsung hero on offense for this football team yesterday, to the tune of 133 yards on 17 carries. Brian Robinson looked special yesterday. Austin Eckler, the wily veteran that they brought in from the Chargers, opened the game with a 90-yard kickoff return. Unfortunately, it was called back. That almost set the tone for the game. But Austin Eckler showing he still has some will. So for anyone that thought that Austin Eckler was done and was buried in the coffin, no. Austin Eckler looks just as dominant and as good as he has over the previous seasons with the Chargers. So Washington decided they were going to run the football, and it changed the dynamic of the game. And it played a big part for them as later in the game, it eerily looked like the Giants defenders were getting a little gassed. They were getting a little tired, where early in the game, they were just teeing off. They were just sending blitz after blitz after blitz against Jaden Daniels. It helped Jaden Daniels settle down too, because in the fourth quarter, he started making nice passes. He started hitting his receivers. Noah Brown, who Washington just brought in 2 weeks ago, right before Tampa, last week in their opener, he was waived by the Houston Texans, not because he can't play, but because the Texans have gone young and they legitimately have 5 really good receivers. Noah Brown is a very good receiver, and he's automatically now going to be the number 2 here in Washington behind Terry McLaurin. Well, yesterday, Noah Brown had 3 catches for 54 yards, and they were critical catches, big catches, drive sustaining catches. And if you can get that kind of production when your number 1 isn't playing well, or isn't really being targeted, or is being blanketed and taken out of the game. Although you guys know how I feel about that. Number 1 should never be taken out of any game because you're that good. Well, anyway, Terry McLaurin had 6 catches for 22 yards. That's a little over 3 yards a catch. That's not going to get it done as a number 1 receiver, regardless of what's being thrown at you. He's going to have to play better for Washington if they're going to have any hope to be a team that can compete for anything this year. So we talked about some of these guys that, produce for Washington, the unheralded players. Zach Ertz had 4 catches for, I think, 68 yards, so he himself had a really nice game. And I think for Washington to be able to find different pieces, different players to step up when they needed it and not have to depend on a Terry McLaurin, I think that was big, not to have to depend on the legs of Jaden Daniels in the second half. That's big for this team offensively. But Cliff Kingsbury, you've got to take some shots down the field. You have to. I was on a show with Jason Campbell, former quarterback for the Redskins at the time, now obviously the Commanders. And he said that, Joe Gibbs and these guys, when he was there, they wanted to take 2 deep shots per quarter, even if it was nothing there, just to keep the defense honest. And I think because Washington's starting the game with back-to-back bubble screens, flats, out to Brian Robinson. They did this in Tampa last week. First play was almost a fumble of a lateral. And the second play, they did the same thing to the other side of the field. They ran this exact 2 same plays. I'm almost convinced that they were the 2 exact same plays they ran against Tampa. So hopefully we don't see that Monday night in Cincinnati. But for Washington, we know who the player of the game was. And before we say that, let me say on defense, Frankie Louvu got a game ball. Should have gotten a game ball if I was giving him out, because that guy was out there cranking people all day long, trying to set some intensity and a tone for a defense that up until this point really hadn't been physical. So he came out, was lights out, played a really good game, and kind of got his name in the lights for fans to know that this guy's one of the hardest hitters on their team, and he's coming with a lot of energy. So Frankie Louvu, to me, was the Brian Robinson of the offense. He was for the defense. But the player of the game, folks, no, it wasn't Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels was right there, too, as one of the guys you can consider. But clearly the player of the game was newly signed kicker this week, and Austin Siebert. The guy came out and was 7 for 7, a franchise record. Not just, because it was his first game. 7 for 7 is a Commander's record. And it's also a Commander's record for 7 consecutive in the same game. So this guy comes in his first game, and I'll be talking with Bob and DJ about this later. But imagine the pressure that this kid had to come in with in order to make these kicks. Not only was he kicking for his team to win a game, but he's kicking for his livelihood because he also understands that the blueprint before him with Dan Quinn and Adam Peters, since they've been in Washington, is they don't hold on to kickers very long, especially if you're missing one or two kicks. So this guy had the ultimate and pressure on him. A division game against the New York Giants. Obviously, people are going to be watching it nationally because it's the Giants and it's the Commanders. Then, of course, you're kicking in a game that you knew was going to be closely contested, where the losing team was probably going to spiral a little bit. And unfortunately, the Giants are getting ready to go through that right now. I truly believe that. But he's kicking for his livelihood. He's kicking because he knows, like I said, the blueprint before him is if you miss now, you might be on the chopping block. So kudos to Austin Siebert. He was the player of the game. They rightfully so picked him up after he made the game-winning field goal to win it 21-18. They carried him off the field, and I thought that was a really nice moment for him. It's also a moment that this team knows now that they have a kicker. Because I don't think it can get any more pressure filled for him now. He made 7 in a row in a critical game. Hopefully to him, he proved that he has ice in his veins. Hopefully to him, he proved that he can do this at that level at a record pace. And hopefully that quiets this talk of Washington not having a kicker for literally the past 4 or 5 years. So hopefully they can get that done and he can get it done and continue to sustain what he did yesterday. Overall, the win for Washington, as we said, it was big. No one wants to go down 0-2. Just ask the Baltimore Ravens. Just ask the Cincinnati Bengals. No one wants to be 0-2 because you're putting yourself in a situation where you have to come out and get a W each week now. You've got to get a win in week 3 if you're 0-2. And it kind of makes you play a little tighter, because you start to press. Guys who are really good want to make a play every chance they get to help their team, but sometimes you can press. And now Washington's going to travel to Cincinnati on Monday, next Monday, of course, Monday Night Football, primetime, to face an 0-2 Joe Burrow-led football team. That's something that I don't think anyone foresaw happening. And I can say this, for my money, Cincinnati outplayed Kansas City yesterday. They absolutely did. They should have walked out of Arrowhead Stadium with a W. I don't go by the call at the end of the game. That was pass interference. It was the right call. Maybe sometimes you don't want to see it called, but it was the right call. However, there were other times in the game that Cincinnati let Kansas City hang around, and for my money, Cincinnati should have won the football game. So Washington's going to get a pretty angry football team in search of their first win. Perhaps Washington can catch a team that's pressing, perhaps catch a team that's lacking confidence now, and you kind of catch them slipping. But it's going to be tough because it's in Cincinnati, it's at home, and it's prime time. Games Washington normally don't fare well with. So we'll see how this is. It's a new regime, new group. We don't want to talk about that. People are still not sold on Washington after the win because their offense couldn't punch the ball in the end zone. Listen, if you get the ball in the red zone 7 times, that means your offense is moving between the hash marks. That means they are moving between the 20s. They're doing it. But just when they get to the 20 and get, beyond that in that red zone, that's where they've had their struggles. So if they can tighten up some things, as my father would always tell me, tighten up. If you can shore up some things there, I really, truly believe if you're Washington, you'll start putting some points on the board, some touchdowns. You'll start walking away with maybe 2 touchdowns a game. And now if you have this kicker that can continuously nail these kicks that he's been making, you're good for 20 points a game. You can win some football games. I've always said in the NFL, if you can get 20 points from your offense, your defense has to step up and do their job to bring a win home for you, to bring it home. And I think Washington's going to be teetering around that number all year long, right around that 20-point mark to get it done. So we'll see how that plays out. But I will say this to fans. That Buccaneer loss doesn't look so bad now because Tampa rolled up into Detroit last year, the scene of the crime for them, where they lost in the divisional playoff game against Detroit. Well, they went back up to Motown yesterday and they got their groove on. I mean, they did. They beat Detroit in Detroit, and now Tampa's 2-0, surprisingly, and they look pretty good. They look solid. They look like the type of team that's not going to beat themselves. They're going to let you do that. They're going to let you make mistakes and they'll capitalize on that. They're an opportunistic football team under Todd Bowles and led by Baker Mayfield. I like what Tampa's doing, and now having seen them up close and personal last week against Washington and Tampa, and now seeing them go to Detroit and win. I mean, listen, this loss for Washington against them doesn't look bad now. So if Washington can sustain some momentum here, they've got 2 games coming up, one against the Cardinals in 2 weeks, and then obviously this week, Monday night in Cincinnati. Those are both road games. There's going to be 2 tough opponents. The Cardinals won yesterday. They clearly look like they have life again under Kyler Murray. So Washington's got 2 tough games coming up. They're not easy games, but are they winnable? They can be if you play up to your potential. So it's going to be interesting to see how Jaden Daniels, how he plays, how Brian Robinson, can he continue the pace that he had yesterday? Austin Eckler, can Terry McLaurin come to life? Can they finally get some production from their true #1 wide receiver? Because if he comes to life, now the offense comes to life and things can start to happen here for Washington. Clearly, they've got to turn it up on defense. The defense has not been getting teams off the field. If Malik Neighbors doesn't drop that 4th down pass inside the red zone, Giants more than likely win the football game, even though they didn't have a kicker. And ironically, the kicker in that game would have been none other than Graham Gano, who was obviously here in Washington for a couple of years. So, man, I tell you, it was just so much storyline going on. And, and then you're looking up and you're looking down at your phone and you're looking in the press box and you're seeing on the overhead other scores of some of the other games that are going on. And I'm like, are we really witnessing this right now? Are we really noticing that the Dallas Cowboys are getting smoked at home? I mean, like punished by the New Orleans Saints. I think they have 5 straight scoring drives on them to start the game. I mean, they leaned up into Dallas. So that wasn't good, if you're a Cowboys fan, especially the way you looked the week before in week 1 against Cleveland, where people started to tout you already as a true contender with this new defense under Mike Zimmer and who needs Dan Quinn and Joe Witten, these guys. Well, be careful what you say and be careful what you wish for, because you found out yesterday. No offense if you're a Cowboys fan. I have to keep this bias as an NFL insider, but you are who we thought you were. And until you prove people otherwise, people are going to consider the Dallas Cowboys frauds. That's just the way it is. If you're a Cowboys fan, my father, rest in peace, my dad was a Cowboys fan, diehard Cowboys fan. Can you imagine that with me growing up in D.C. with him? He was a diehard Cowboys fan. But I used to tell him all the time. So they show me something. I mean, it's just they can be America's team all they want. It's more like America's sweetheart, because they're losing. They're not getting it done. They're just not. So you look at these teams that you consider to be front runners, Cowboys, they didn't get it done. But look at New Orleans on the other side. 2-0, folks. Did you ever think we would be talking about New Orleans being 2-0? Derek Carr, Dennis Allen, the coach. I mean, they seem to have something going there. Alvin Kamara looked like the old Alvin Kamara yesterday. And then they got the speedsters on the outside, So New Orleans looks like a team now that don't sleep on them. Those are 2 quality wins that they've had. And they're showing that, everyone can talk about in the offseason about Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta and, can Baker Mayfield do it again? And he got his money in Tampa. No one was talking about New Orleans. And now New Orleans is right there in that division. And they look like they could be a favorite as well as Tampa. I'm still going to go with Tampa because I just think that they've been there, done that. But New Orleans is right there, and they're playing pretty good defense as well. So you look at some of these other teams that are shocking people, catching people off guard. The Minnesota Vikings are another football team. Sam Darnold, remember years ago, Sam Darnold was the hot guy coming out of USC. I remember they beat my Penn State Nittany Lions in the Rose Bowl. I won't talk about that. But they beat us in the Rose Bowl, and everyone was like, this guy right here could be the next one coming. what didn't really work out for him in New York. I mean, different market, media market from a low key guy coming from California. I mean, it was just different fit, and it didn't work for him. And he went to some other teams, and now found a home. It looks like in Minnesota, and with the injury to JJ McCarthy, who maybe some fans in Minnesota at some point, if Minnesota weren't playing well, would push for the rookie to get in. Well, he's out for the year, so you have to stay with Sam Darnold. And I think Kevin O'Connell has proven his merit and his worth as a just a ridiculously good coach. Kevin was my guy when he was here in Washington, and I really wanted Ron Rivera when he came in to give Kevin O'Connell an opportunity to be his offensive coordinator. That didn't happen. Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips, who was here too, went on. He was a tight ends coach in Washington. He went on, and now he's offensive coordinator. So they're doing some good things in Minnesota with that football team, but it's their defense that's playing lights out. So another surprising team that has stepped up. Another team that's kind of catching some people off guard, not playing well. Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore Ravens lost a lot of defensive coaches from their defense. And I mean, obviously, Mike McDonald was their defensive coordinator, so you think of him going to Seattle to become their head coach, and you knew it was going to be a different adjustment if they stayed within house. Maybe not, but they brought in somebody new, so it's like they're learning some new terminology, new defensive schemes right now. And you can see that their defense hasn't hit their stride yet. The Ravens are built on running the football, some play action with Lamar, but running the football. They went out and got Derrick Henry to go with the kid Mitchell, and that's a nice tandem if they put it together. But now, right now, it seems like Todd Monken's reaching a little bit on some things. So Baltimore's got a lot of things they've got to fix. The problem is they're in a division that was supposed to be tough, and I think it still will be tough. And the reason why I say that I think that division, is going to be tough is because when you think about it, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 2-0, surprisingly and quietly 2-0. And they were supposed to be the bottom feeder in that division. It was supposed to be the Ravens, Cincinnati, and Cleveland battling it out. And Pittsburgh just wasn't supposed to be part of that trio, wasn't supposed to be invited to that party. Well, now Pittsburgh is the party. They're 2-0 in the division. Cleveland won yesterday, bounce back game against Jacksonville. So they're 1-1. But we talked about Cincinnati 0-2 and Baltimore 0-2, the two teams that most people thought were going to be two of the best teams in all of football this year to challenge Kansas City. They still very well might do that. But right now they're 0-2 and they're in must win territory here. Cincinnati has to win next weekend. Baltimore has to win next weekend, or it could get ugly for those teams. And that would be a surprise considering that they also have two of the faces of the league at quarterback in Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. So both those teams are going to be up against it. Right now, I love the way the NFL is going, folks. I truly believe that. I'm not a really big fan of parity, but I like when teams that no one thought had a shot are playing like they can be something. There's going to be really bad teams. No offense, Carolina, but you're it. Tag. You're bad. So you're going to have bad football teams like Carolina that just they're not going anywhere anytime soon. But you're going to have teams that are like teetering right in the middle of things where they could be decent or they could be horrible. And I think that, a team like Washington's right there. They're teetering right in the middle where, they could do some things and be good, or it could fall apart for them. So we'll see, folks. We'll see, folks. But we're going to take a break here. And when we come back right here on the Lake Lewis Jr. Show, we're going to have two of my good friends coming on, Mr. Bob Matthews and also Mr. DJ Bland joining me, breaking down again Commanders as well as other stories around the league. Before we go to break, as always, if you want to follow me on social media, you can follow me at Lake Lewis Jr. on all social media formats. You can go to sportsjourney.com where you can see the new guys and all the good stuff that they're doing over there. They launched yesterday the first ever on our network, the first ever Washington Commanders post-game show. So they'll be doing that. I may make appearances on there, but I still have to do my other assignments like the ABC and stuff like that. So I may still make some appearances on there, but please check them out. I implore you to. They're doing an awesome job and they're good people. You know how I do it. So, also, you can subscribe to this podcast via all major podcast carriers. You can watch it on sportsjourney.com, and then you also can subscribe and watch it on YouTube under the Sports Journey channel. So we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll have one, two of my good friends, and we'll still break down some Commanders and other NFL stuff. So hang tight. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Lake Lewis Jr. Show. And as promised, I told you on Mondays and Fridays, we're going to get the family members in here to help me break down a recap of what happened yesterday at the newly crowned Northwest Stadium for the Washington Commanders. And right now I'm joined by none other than the Bob Matthews of the Bob Matthews Show. Does a great job. He's covered the Commanders for years. I actually met him in the press box years ago. And then, of course, DJ Bland, who obviously needs no introduction as well. If you're a Sports Journey fan with us, does a great job on his podcast, The Not Bland Show. And DJ over the years has covered the likes of the NFC South. So he's doing it again for us. So we're going to get his take on what's going on in that wacky division as well. So, gentlemen, yesterday.
Yes.
It was a big one. Say what you want as far as how Washington won. The bottom line is they beat a team that they have had trouble beating over the years. In fact, New York was 7-2-1 against Washington over their last 10 games. So, Bob, what did you think of the outcome of this football game?
I thought it was a big, big relief for the organization, for the fan base, for the players, the coaches, everybody, because if that thing had gone sideways at the end, and full disclosure, I kind of was expecting it to, but if it had gone sideways, man, this would not be a good day because I mean, the Giants did everything they could to hand it to Washington yesterday. Fortunately, they were able to take it when they did hand it to them. A win is a win. You got to kind of roll with it from there. One of the players in the locker room said, "Hey, an NFL win is an NFL win. They're all hard. So no matter how you get it, you take it."
Absolutely. And DJ, I mean, when you look at some of the facets of the game yesterday that were really important, you think of the fact that if you're the Commanders, you have this rookie quarterback that's, sensational. You can see that he's going to be a game changer long term for them if he learns how to get down. I want to get your take on when he went down. Did you hold your breath? Because I can tell you in the stadium, it was a hush over everyone.
I had that gut feeling of RG3 when that leg whip happened against the Baltimore Ravens. I seen him take that shot to the ribs, and I was like, "Oh, that's not good." And I know he wants to make plays, but he's also got to be able to realize that he's got to be here for the franchise. And I appreciate his moxie. I appreciate his ability to want to, grind and make plays for his team. But let's be smart about it.
Yeah,
you have to be smart about it because there is such a dearth of talent on this team.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the offense. Jaden Daniels obviously is a special player who's going to grow, who looks like he's going to grow into a franchise player. But after that, after Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr., the list grows really short. I wished I could include Terry McLaurin in that, but I think just because there are so few other options on offense for the receivers,
yeah,
defenses are just going to bracket him the whole time. So, again, Daniels is one of the few game changers out there. Yeah, if he gets himself hurt, it's kind of frightening to think how bad this offense could be.
Yeah, I think there's no question that Jaden's their best player. I mean, I think you'd have to be, a son of, Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder,
right,
in order not to see that. I mean, the guy's phenomenal. And I think for the most part, guys, when you really start to look at everything that he's doing, he's a gentleman that is changing the perception of what is a great player for Washington. Because over the years, we've had too many cases where maybe a player that was good was propped up to be great, but it wasn't seen that way around the league. And
right.
I've said this over and over for the past, 15 years, maybe 20 years. I think there were only really two players, perhaps a third had he not been injured, and we know who that was. But the other two guys that were literally considered great around the league and were feared around the league was Trent Williams, and then you had to go back to Sean Taylor. But now I truly believe you have a talent in Jaden Daniels that's already, I go back 2 weeks ago, guys, when I was in Tampa. By the end of the second quarter, Tampa players were picking him up off the ground, not taunting him, they were helping him up as a sign of respect. And I think that that's something that Washington has, but they need more dogs like that around him in order to really be a special type of team. So I do want to pose this question to both you guys, as we break down this recap of Washington's big win yesterday. Have they found their kicker, or is it just one game you still have to hold your horses?
I think they have.
No, go ahead, D.
I think they have. I mean, one thing about this franchise that they've done is they have quickly pulled the trigger to get rid of guys. I mean, David Akers is part of that. Hopkins is part of that.
Graham Gano.
Graham Gano.
Who ironically didn't play.
They have
right.
to. yeah. But they have to stick with this guy. I think it's a great first game for him. When you look at what has been happening here, he had an exceptional game for a first game in live bullet action. Mm-hmm. To be able to make the kicks that he made was stellar. You had to have ice in your veins, and you had to not worry about, I can't afford to miss this. He just went out there and did his job. And, sometimes kickers are going to get into slumps, but I think Washington has got to just settle down. And this is the guy you got to keep here for at least the foreseeable future and possibly the long haul if he can show you that he's worth keeping around here. But this carousel has to stop.
Well, you guys know over the years, there's Bob, there's been many kickers that have bounced around 3, 4, 5 teams, and then they've finally found a home. Some of them end up, in Canton. So it's possible that they have found that, but what were you going to go with that?
Oh, I know. I was just going to say, I agree with DJ because, I get it that only one of them was, outside of 45 yards. And the rest were chip shots, but still, a chip shot in the NFL is still a chip shot in the NFL. The fact that he knocked down 6 chip shots and a 47-yard one, he had to know that the pressure was on him because of the way the offense was performing. So, yeah, with any luck, they've at least found somebody they can rely on for the rest of the year. And unfortunately, I think he's probably going to be an important part of this team because I think what you saw on Sunday was unfortunately the way this team's going to win games, at least for the next couple of months. They're going to want to take the air out of the ball. They're going to want to, try to ground and pound till they make no sound and try to win this thing on the margins. And that's going to mean, they don't have room for a guy to come in and go 2 for 4, kicking field goals. This team, I don't think is good enough to overcome something like that.
I agree with you. The margin of error is very slim. And, you did say something that made perfect sense. And I'll expound on it a little bit. Not only was there pressure for him to make kicks, forget this game. It's just the fact that he knew that the kicker who was brought in recently before him was let go after a bad game. So he was doing more than kicking for a win. He was kicking for his livelihood, which puts even more pressure on you to go 7 for 7 against a divisional nemesis who you've lost to over the years. I think if anything, things should get easier for him. If you really think about it, he should have confidence now, sky-high confidence. His teammates clearly believe in him. They carried him off the field. So those are the type of things that maybe, just through the luck of experiment, you found something that now could be an intricate part of your offense. Because as you said, the good thing is that their offense is moving the ball in between the 20s, but they just, for whatever reason, can't cash in when they get in the red zone. But hey, if you can walk away with 7 field goals in a game, that's still 21 points. And most teams will tell you, if you assure them they're going to get 21 points in a game, and it's all on your kicker, I think teams are signing up for that.
Yeah, well, what Joe Gibbs used to say, 3 touchdowns and a field goal, I'll take it. You'll win most of your games if you do that. And let's hope by some, in some way, shape, or form, this was an aberration that we saw last week, and they're going to have some success in the red zone this year. Knock on wood. Hopefully.
What would you guys say as far as For me, my game ball on defense went out to Frankie Louvu. I think he just had a phenomenal football game. He was cracking heads all day long and set the tone, for the physical type of defense that Joe Witt and Dan Quinn want. So he clearly had put his stamp on the defense yesterday. I thought Bobby Wagner had a better game too. But let's call it like it is. There's no pass rush. There's really a whole lot not happening around the edges. And surprisingly, Jamin Davis was inactive. He was up in the press box. I mean, so to see that was like, he's in a sweep up here. Why is he not down on the field? So unless they're working a trade or something like that, I understand Johnny Newton, Jerzon Newton played his first game and actually played pretty well the 11 snaps that he had. He was double teamed 5 times out of those 11 snaps. But nevertheless, you knew you needed to get pressure on Daniel Jones, who's had career games against you. Why would a Jamin Davis not be suited up? DJ, what was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was pretty surprising. I have a real big frustration with that. And if you look at the stat sheet, Deron Payne's name is not on it. And Jonathan Allen is only on there for 2 assisted tackles. Those are supposed to be your stars. And again, time in and time out, they don't shine at all. And
when you need them to.
Exactly. And once again, they're being run right at. And then when you have a guy who is, I've been saying this since the Senior Bowl, since I saw Daniel Jones at the Senior Bowl, he's an average quarterback at best. And you make him look like the next coming of. And it's just not cool. There's too many great players. There's too many solid guys on the front that have athletic ability, that have the ability to be able to take over a ball game. And it seems like the dog ain't in them. It's patty cakes, baker's man. Bake me a cake as fast as you can. Like, this ain't going to work.
Watch a quarterback run by me as fast as you can. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do here? At some point, somebody's got to step up on the front and be consistent and be consistently a ravaging dog that's going to be disruptive. Otherwise, against better football teams, this defense is going to get gutted.
Bob, I think Johnny Newton's that guy, but he's obviously played in his first game yesterday. He's got to get his wind and get his body right again. But I think he has everything that they want to be that nasty interior lineman. Because as DJ said, Bob, we've talked about it too. We're just not seeing the tandem of John Allen and Deron Payne even showing up at the same time. That would be big for Washington if they did.
Yeah, I think Payne said after the game, that both of them were getting double teamed almost every snap. And, and maybe that's a result of the scheme with only playing 3 down linemen and whatnot. But then again, you have to question, all right, is that really what we want to be doing with the scheme if we've got all of this money / perceived talent invested into defensive tackles?
Yeah.
And the Jamin Davis thing, I was listening to Dan Quinn earlier today. He claims it was a numbers game, the fact that you had to have a 5th defensive tackle because you were going to have Johnny Newton on a pitch count. Yeah. And for that reason, Jamin Davis wasn't on the field. But wow, it's, say what you want. The guy was still a 1st-round draft pick. Even if he was overdrafted, somebody was going to pick him up that year in the 1st round anyway.
And he played well last week.
He played well.
Sure did.
So, he gave them something that some of the other guys didn't.
Right.
I look at Dorrance Armstrong and I, look at Fowler and some of these guys, and they're getting around the edge. They're just not finishing. But those guys, to me, aren't expected to be as dominant of players as John Allen and Deron Payne. No, and this is, again, what I think is going to start being said. And I've already been saying it. I know guys probably don't like me coming in the locker room now because of it. But it's the same thing I'm saying with Terry McLaurin. I think Terry's a really good football player, even better guy. But is he a true alpha number 1? And I think when you go around, I think when you go around the league and you break it down, there's probably 16, 17 teams that he could start and be a number 1 on. I truly believe that.
Right.
But to me, that's not an alpha number 1. An alpha number 1 is on anybody's team, unless it's Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, well, guess what? They'd be dual alphas if they were played together. I just want to see a guy that, these guys can't keep using this excuse that they're being double teamed. That's a sign of being great. When you're double teamed, that's the other team recognizing that you are a dominant force and they need to neutralize you. But guess what the elite players do? They work through the double teams. They fight them off. They still
look at
make
Bosa.
plays. Yeah, I mean,
go look at Bosa and all these other
any of these guys. Absolutely.
Those guys ain't allowing 603 yards in 2 games. I can tell you that.
They're not. You look at teams like Minnesota. Minnesota's undefeated, guys, with Sam Darnold as the quarterback.
Yeah.
But you know what they're doing? They're playing great defense. And I thought for what we were told and pushed all offseason about, we're going to get to the ball in a violent manner and bad intentions and all this stuff, the defense looks eerily similar as far as the effort level from the previous regime players. If that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah, no. Well, and I think it gets back to, again, when we talk about the lack of overall talent on this roster. And I know, yes, they turned it over in the offseason. Mm-hmm. There are 30 new players and all that, but you can't fix it all in one offseason. No, and it's I think what we're seeing is just how bad of a personnel guy Ron Rivera was over the last 4 years. I think when Adam Peters came in and took a look at this roster, I think all the blood probably drained out of his face. And he was like, my God, I can't believe it's this bad. And that's what I think, because there is so much lack of talent on both sides of the ball. The good players, the really solid players, and maybe Payne and Allen aren't Bosa elite, but they're good enough to be, quote unquote, all pros if they've got somebody around them that can, they can take advantage of the fact that they're double teamed. But they're getting double teamed on every play because the other, Tampa and New York weren't worried about whoever was coming from the edge. They weren't worried about them getting home to the quarterback. So why not double team them? If you've got a threat of a guy getting home, then that's going to ease up on the double teaming.
Well, I'll say this too, and right now, folks, talking with two of my Sports Journey family members, Bob Matthews does a great job with the Bob Matthews podcast. Make sure you subscribe to that. And we have DJ Bland, does a great job with his podcast, the Not Bland Show, also covers the NFC South. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. We'll get away from Washington. We have about 10 minutes or so left, guys, in the segment. So still have a lot of time to talk about some things. But before we wrap up the Commanders part with that defensive line, all we heard last year, maybe 2 years previous, was how bad those two defensive ends were and how they really weren't worth the money and the headaches. And sometimes it start make me wonder, like, did they pick the wrong two, or should they divided them up, kept one end and one tackle and parted with the tackle in an end? I mean, I'm not trying to be negative. You guys know I don't play the cynical role here, but when you have a lot of your defensive cap money tied up into two players in the middle of your field, and not only are they not getting pass rushes, teams are running boom right at them, right into the teeth of that defense. That's not a promising sign. And we do know with Dan Quinn's defense is as great as they've been everywhere he's been. They've never really been known to have those two monsters in the middle of the field. In Dallas, they caused turnovers and they were fast, but they had an all-world, uber backer, linebacker, defensive end, and Micah Parsons wreaking havoc. But they didn't have the guys in the middle of the field, hence why their last 3 games, they've been punched in the mouth, and teams are running on them. They're picking up where Green Bay left off, and the Saints did it yesterday against Dallas. So with that said, let's transition into the NFL and talk about some of these surprise teams. Were you guys surprised with the way the Saints just manhandled Dallas yesterday? Bob?
Yeah, absolutely. When I saw the score, I was like, holy cow. I was surprised that the Saints ran up that many points, but at the same time,
Mhm.
you know, you could kind of see it coming with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Just because, and granted, we're all commanders
Mhm.
here, so we're not going to cut the Cowboys any slack. But I've been saying for a generation now that in Dallas it's all hat and no cattle.
Yeah.
And that they're a massive fraud, and I think that's what you're seeing, the fact that Jerry Jones has chosen to pay a couple of guys, but
As opposed to filter the
yeah,
money.
you're seeing the depth, and kind of waste away there. I remember hearing in the offseason, I can't remember which beat writer it was from Dallas, but saying that he thought it was maybe a 9-win team this year, and I'm like, wow, if you got a beat writer saying that, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
yeah, I
you
think they
guys.
got I think they may have problems in Dallas this year.
Yeah, and I said this, a couple months back that I really felt like the Eagles win the division and they were going to run away with it, and I still feel like that. But I think when I mean by run away, they'll win the division by 2 or more games. But I
Mm.
feel like the second team, it's up for grabs. And I said that
Yes.
Washington, if they could just come out the gates fast, they would have a chance to put pressure on Dallas because Dallas has talent. No one's debating that, but it's in here that everyone questions. And,
Absolutely.
and that's going to be
And even even Philly. I mean, okay, week one, fine.
Mhm.
You're still dealing with a team here that's still smarting after that late season collapse last year. If they go into, depending on when people, we're inside baseball here. We're recording this before Monday Night Football,
Mhm.
but they go into Atlanta and lose. This whole division is up for grabs, like you said, because the Eagles are about this close to imploding, and Nick Sirianni losing that locker room too. Who knows where this division is going to go?
Well, I tell
Yeah.
you what, DJ, that's your ballpark, the NFC South. I mean, I'm gonna throw it at you. Do the Falcons have a shot at the link tonight?
I think it's very difficult from what I saw when I was in Atlanta for week one, and then had an opportunity to kind of watch the coaches tape a little bit and kind of break things down. My biggest concern is just that the same thing we saw with Aaron Rodgers was wrong with Kirk Cousins. Kirk is not trusting the surgically repaired ankle
Achilles.
with that
Mhm.
Achilles. And
Mhm.
you saw all game long that he was throwing off his front foot and he was guiding the ball instead of throwing the ball. And when you're trying to throw a football like darts, well, it ends up all over the place in the dirt, off to the left in the dirt. And at times where he could have thrown the ball over the top of the two defenders, he threw it straight to him because he's not pushing off of the back foot. Number two, game plan. Do you really think it's a smart idea to put Kirk Cousins with a surgically repaired Achilles in the pistol? You're a fool for thinking that because they know he's not going to run anywhere. So they've got to switch up with what their game plan is. They've proven that running back wise with Bijan Robinson and Algier that they can get things done. Now you've got to find a way to get Pitts and London involved into this offense. And if they can find a way to do that tonight, I think they have a good opportunity. Let's not forget that Atlanta defense made their opponent kick 6 field goals. And if their offense had given them something, they likely could have had an opportunity to win this game. And y'all know how I feel about Kellen Moore. I think Sirianni is digging his own grave. He should have kept Brian Johnson. He decided that he wanted to use Johnson as a scapegoat, and you bring in a guy that practically ruined my Chargers. So I really don't want to hear about, what he's done in the past, because when we all look at it, when the things matter and when things matter for their teams, Kellen Moore is a loser. He was a loser in Dallas. He was a loser in LA, and he's going to come here. And we've seen it. They just played a team that was a little bit worse than they were in their first game. 2 interceptions from Hurts. The big deal is Saquon. If you stop Saquon and put it on Hurts, we know what Hurts is going to do. Love the guy. But Kellen Moore is going to put that man in the position where he's going to throw interceptions. You know what happens. If you get turnovers and too many of those, you're likely going to lose the ball game. So I do think they do have a shot.
Well, I can tell you this: there's another facet that's developing, and that's that AJ Brown's out tonight. So
Ooh.
You know,
Yep.
that's a big blow for the
Big
Eagles
blow.
because now you have to put pressure on Devonta Smith and can I say it? Jahan Dotson. I mean, so
There you go.
right. So now
Yeah.
it won't be any excuses. I mean, because they're
No
going to beat them
excuses.
tonight. Because as you said, DJ, there's no question that the Falcons and that defense, Raheem Morris, they're going to stack the box and they're going to say,
Yes.
Saquon, you're not going to be the one tonight. We're going to need Jalen to basically beat us with his arm, which we have seen over the years. If that is the sole focus and there is no running game, he struggles. If they
Yep.
can get some balance there, that's when he's at his most dominant. So that's an interesting development. So we have about 4 minutes left, guys. So we have to keep our answers short here. But some other teams, Washington, we talked about the big win, but we didn't talk about the team that they have to play now on Monday night, who's going to be at home, Cincinnati, at 0-2.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's good for Washington or if that's horrible for Washington because Cincinnati now has a must-win game in week 3 against Washington.
Well, you have to kinda,
it's horrible for Washington. I can
yeah.
almost guarantee that. You know, first week the Bengals they just got bit. You know, by New England. Who knew that was going to happen? But sometimes it does. Yesterday, Sunday, hey, it's the Chiefs. It's on the road. The fact that they had a shot there at the end.
Should have won that game.
tells you
They
that
outplayed Kansas City yesterday.
They
Yeah.
did. They did.
They did.
And the fact that I guess they're going to have both receivers back next week,
Mhm.
and with what they saw with Washington's secondary, I mean, Burrow ought to be just chucking it down the field all night. And it is. It's a must game for the Bengals. They can't go 0-3 in that division. So
The curtains.
the only good thing for the Commanders is that there's no pressure there. Hey, keep it close, and you can come out of there feeling fairly decently about yourself.
That would be
I
something.
agree. I agree.
DJ, another team that's kind of up in your neck of the woods, Jacksonville Jaguars. Oops, they're hanging an egg right now. Is it getting a little tight for Peterson? And your guy just got all this money in the offseason, Trevor Lawrence. I don't want to put it all on the both of those guys because their defense isn't stopping a cold either. But
Right.
what is the problem in Jacksonville?
A lot of it's on the execution side of the ball. And I do feel like regardless, 20 points against Miami, 18 points against the Browns there, that's enough for you to get a win. And it all starts to me on the offensive side of the ball for them. The defense is giving them every opportunity to try to get a win. But first of all, you can't take a safety there in that instance. Your defense held them to 3 points in that half.
Yeah.
All you had to do was produce. And there's too many miscues. There's too many mental errors by this football team. They just don't seem to be as a cohesive unit. And we also have to look at Doug Peterson and how this whole offensive thing runs, right? There's an expiration. It appears to be there's an expiration date when it comes to Doug Peterson and his offense. We saw it.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
We saw it with the Eagles.
Running a foul here.
And it seems like every time we get around that couple year mark, we start reading that it starts to go bad. It's time to move on because it's about to expire. They got too many talented people on this thing.
Oh, yeah.
They gotta find a way.
Actually. Yeah,
right.
They're loaded offensively.
They gotta find a way.
Yeah, and they have a pretty good line.
It starts. Yes, they've got to connect, and if wide receiver quarterback has to play better. He has the time. They just have to do a better job of execution, catching the ball. And if they can do that, they have every inkling and every ability to be at the top of that division.
Well, gentlemen, I mean, it's almost that time to wrap this up. And I mean, we could do this all day, all night, but very candid points. So, if you get emails and bad comments from people, that's on you from what you guys said. But no. This was good stuff. And this is what we'll be doing every Monday, getting, some recaps of things going on, not just with the Commanders, but around the league as well. And, it is right now. It's a surprise start for the league. I mean, some of the frontline players, we didn't even mention the Ravens who are 0-2.
Yeah.
We didn't mention the fact that the Steelers are 2-0. We didn't mention the fact, that you look around this league, San Francisco struggled with Minnesota. I mean, it's just right now it's still early. So if you are a Commanders fan, I mean, take that win yesterday, how you get it. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
You still had a big win and you live to fight another day. And now you get a team that's probably going to be roaring and chomping at the bit to get a W, but they might press a little bit, which could lead to Washington going in there. And as Bob said, just basically playing with house money at this point. So, gentlemen, we're going to be doing this every Monday, having fun with this. So appreciate you guys coming on. And as always, folks, Bob Matthews, check out the Bob Matthews Show. Great, great podcast. And he doesn't just talk football. He talks about everything on there. And then with DJ on the Not Bland Show, this guy is one of the best faces in the world of racing. If you want to get into that, he's your guy for that as well. So I'm going to have him on every Monday with me, folks. And hopefully it's on a winning Monday for the Washington Commanders. So we'll see what happens next week. So because next Monday, the game is happening in Cincinnati Monday night, I'm going to have you guys on to kind of give me predictions, for Monday night. So,
Gotcha.
All right, gentlemen, we got to wrap this up. I'm like 10 seconds out, but I appreciate you guys coming on and I'll talk with you soon.